Chris Paul down with a right thumb avulsion fracture. What happened here? What does it mean? And how the Suns can overcome it? Coming up on today's Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, covering the Suns the past 5 seasons as a credentialed media member and a contributor at Suns.com, as well as Dime Magazine. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen each and every day. Thank you for finding us on YouTube, where we have cleared that 1,000 subscriber threshold. So thank you very much to everybody who helped get us there. One more week to send in proof of your subscription to the YouTube channel so you can get a Kelly Oubre bobblehead, Converse, AirPods, the whole nine. He could be yours. DM me on Twitter, drop a comment below, email me, whatever is easiest for you, and we will get that out to one lucky subscriber by the end of the week. Big shout out to everybody, of course, listening across all podcast platforms as well. And you can keep up with everything we do at Locked On PHX Suns on Twitter. But very, very straightforward show today. We have to talk about this Chris Paul injury. I wish that we could talk a little bit more about the All-Star game. Devin Booker looked incredible, but unfortunately that was overshadowed by the injury. Chris Paul, again, a right thumb avulsion fracture. Ali LaForce on TNT during the All-Star broadcast was the one to finally give us an update. We had been wandering around in the ether for a while. We didn't have an update. The Suns still have not actually said anything official here, which makes things a little weird. But assuming that Ali is correct, and I have no reason to believe that she is wrong, there's a decent chance that that actually came directly from the team. So we'll talk about what happened, what it means, and who needs to step up in his place. But for those who did not notice or missed it, this injury happened early in the third quarter of Wednesday night's game. I believe 7 or 8 minutes into that third quarter, or remaining in that third quarter against the Houston Rockets, a game the Suns would obviously go on to win. Chris Paul gets his hand seemingly sort of jumbled up in the jersey of Dennis Schroeder. He then goes on to get ejected fairly quickly for protesting the fact that a foul was not called on Schroeder on the play, and goes back to the locker room. Post-game, both Monty says no update. Booker says he didn't notice anything. He saw him in the locker room and there's nothing to worry about. Now, it was a strange thing to say in the moment, and equally strange in hindsight, considering we know now that there was a legitimate injury. But either way, that was the official word. We didn't really know anything more than that throughout media day, media availability for Chris Paul a couple of times this weekend in Cleveland. We had Monty Williams get asked about it during his availability in Cleveland, and nada. There was not any update. But then Ali LaForce gives us what we were needing during the broadcast. So that's what we have to stick with. 6 to 8 weeks is the current timeline, reevaluated in 6 to 8 weeks, more specifically. So that doesn't mean he will be back in 6 weeks necessarily, but the timeline is that they will reevaluate him in 6 to 8 weeks. Now, a few things here. So David Nash on Twitter talked about how the last time because Chris Paul has a history of hand injuries, is a strange thing. I believe this is his fourth one. He has already had another with the Suns, his left hand, last summer during the finals, and we all know he eventually had to get surgery right after Game 6 of that series when it ended. So between his own desire to get steals and the fact that he has the ball so much, and I don't know what else, he tends to have this problem often. But as David Nash noticed, noted on Twitter, the last time Paul had a hand injury, he beat the expectations and was back 5 weeks in. Now, that was not the surgery after the finals, but that was the last time it was a, in-season type of situation. He only missed 5 weeks and he was back. Somebody else noted that Russell Wilson, who had about as nasty of like a finger hand situation as you could possibly imagine this past season for the Seattle Seahawks in the NFL, also, I believe, had a 6 to 8 week timetable and beat those projections himself and was also back in 5 weeks, and not just playing in the NBA, but playing quarterback. And like Chris, that injury was on his dominant hand, his throwing hand. So that does complicate things a bit here, where it's the hand that Chris does everything with. It's not his left hand like it was in the finals, where he was still able to get, 20 and 10 going, but he just was hampered. This is his dominant hand. So he will need to be basically full ready to go in time by the time he wants to play. I mean, he's not going to be able to hide this one, unfortunately. So that is kind of the what of the injury. He got it against the Rockets, but the last piece is he played in the All-Star game. So you could look at that one of two ways. You could say completely irresponsible. Why would he be doing that? Complete mistake. How terrible. Or you could probably look at it as a sign of optimism, which is kind of how I see it, which is that despite the injury, despite the 6 to 8 week timetable, he felt like he and the Suns' doctors probably both felt like it was not bad enough for it to be really, really jeopardized to play, right? It wasn't going to be made incredibly worse by going out there, even if it got bumped or nicked or anything along the way. And he's also not going to have to get surgery, is the other positive sign here. So a little bit of optimism there. We don't know what the full recovery process will look like. That'll obviously be something that we stay up to date with day by day here on the show. And as all of us as Suns supporters and followers and fans will be with our eyes peeled on. But let's talk about what it means in terms of the Suns' ultimate goals this season, the standings, everything else. First, though, guys, today's show brought to you by Built Bar. This is the time of year where a lot of us have given up on our New Year's resolutions, but not this year. Stick to your resolution to eat right with Built Bar. Feels more like it's actually not even part of a New Year's resolution. It doesn't feel like you are having to eat right per se when you are picking up a Built Bar. It feels like a tasty snack. It truly does. And not only the classic Built Bars that you have come to love, I'm sure, if you've listened to this show before, or if you have found them on your own. Peanut butter, brownie, mint, chocolate, raspberry, orange, tons of flavors for the normal classic Built Bar. But in addition, Built Bar Puffs can be part of your diet, your ready to go, good for you diet. Yeah, that's right. They are marshmallowy, they're soft and gooey on the inside, but they are just as good for you as the OG Built Bar. Cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, or my personal favorite, lemon cheesecake. Can't go wrong with the Built Bar Puff or the classic. All low in calorie, all high in protein, all covered in 100% chocolate, and soft and easy to chew, and best of all, delicious. So go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCK15, 15% off at Built.com. So we know what happened with Chris Paul, where things stand physically for him. The biggest question, aside from that, is, well, what happens to the Suns as a result of this? So I want to go kind of from a macro level, like a zoomed out 30,000 foot view level, and then go into some of the specifics of who will need to step up in his absence. But as a reminder to everybody, the Suns are 6.5 games up for not only the best record in the Western Conference, the number one seed out west, but also the number one overall seed in the NBA, which would mean that they would be the home team in the NBA Finals, just as they were last year, if they were to get that far, knock on wood. So 6.5 game lead. They have played 58 games. They only have 44 games left. The regular season, or 24 games left. The regular season ends on April 10th, which is about 6.5 weeks from now. If I have that right. Yeah, about 6.5 weeks from now. I saw a tweet from Tim Bontemps. And also, you also have to think Chris got injured, half a week ago already. So it was basically 7 weeks from when the injury happened. Tim Bontemps of ESPN tweeted the regular season ends in 5 weeks. Not really. 5 weeks from now would be the last week of March. The season is a whole week and a half longer than that. So that's kind of the timetable from that standpoint. The standings are what they are, but the Suns having the lead, a 6.5 game lead with 24 games to go. Let's say they went 12-12. Let's say they just really hit a cold streak here. They struggle to figure things out with Chris. Let history be ignored here. The fact that they won playoff games without Chris Paul last season, just ignore that. Let's say they go 12-12, 500. The Warriors would have to go. How many games do the Warriors have left? The Warriors have one fewer game. They only have 23 left. So you're looking at something like, what would that be? 16? No. Like 19-4, 18-5, something like that. The Warriors would have to go, which, let's see, 19 out of 24 is a 79% winning percentage, which is significantly higher than their current pace on the season. So they would have to be even better by quite a bit than they already have been in getting the second best record in the NBA in order to catch the Suns, even if the Suns fell all the way to 500 during this stretch, which is unlikely in and of itself. So the fact that the Suns have that cushion makes it extremely difficult for me to imagine that the Suns will falter here from a seeding standpoint. Now, maybe if you're the type of person who was really looking forward to like the best record in franchise history, which would be 65 wins, maybe that is a little bit more in jeopardy than it might have been. But I don't think their seeding is really in jeopardy. Another reason to believe that: the Warriors have the 7th most difficult remaining schedule. Their opponents have a combined 51.3 winning percentage. The Suns, on the other hand, are the 6th worst remaining schedule. Their opponents have a combined 48.6 winning percentage. So the Suns are playing, on the whole, a sub 500 team on average every night, whereas the Warriors are playing an above 500 team on average every night, in addition to the cushion the Suns already have, and the fact that the Warriors only have 23 games, one fewer than what the Suns have. So the bottom line, guys, is it's just not going to happen. It would be a really, really big upset for that to happen. You have the Eastern Conference as well, where the next highest, the number one seed in the East is 4 games behind the Warriors. So unless things went incredibly outside of reality, outside of expectations, the Suns are going to finish the season, despite this injury, with the number one overall seed, with the number one seed in the West, of course, as a result of that, and a nice cushion probably against them and the number 2 seed even still. Last but not least, I feel like from a macro standpoint, the other thing that matters is, will Chris Paul be healthy in time for the playoffs? Like, will he be? We don't, obviously it's good to see that he probably will be back in time for the playoffs. I mean, this is a guy who played with the neck, nerve, shoulder thing in last year's playoffs. Told the story about to JJ Redick about that situation last year, where he was told by Monty Williams going into, I believe, game 3 of the Lakers series that he was not going to be playing. And he basically told Monty, no, I am going to be playing, because, again, he could not make it worse. So that's good news. I think it's pretty likely that Paul will return. Let's just say it's 5 weeks. 5 weeks from today would be basically the 1, 2, 3, the 20th of March, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it would be the 27th of March. The Suns have a home game against Philadelphia 76ers that day, followed by at Golden State, at Memphis. So 5 weeks exactly would put him on pace for that stretch, which is a pretty important one to lock up that 1 seed and get ready for the playoffs. And kind of it's the last really big stretch of games for the Suns. And that would give him, let's just paint a picture. He comes back on the 27th. You have Philadelphia, Golden State, Memphis, as I just said, Oklahoma City, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Jazz, and the Kings. I believe that's 8 games to warm up in time for the playoffs. That feels like it could be a soft target. The Suns also have a little bit of a road trip from the 20th through the 24th of March, leading into that Sixers game on the 27th. So you could see, wanting to do it at home. That would give the Suns 3 full days. They have Friday the 25th and Saturday the 26th off, and then they return home for that 3 p.m. tip against the Sixers on the 27th. So I could see that being, as we get closer, a date that you might want to circle and pencil at the very least. 8 games of warm-up into the playoffs, 5 weeks from today, plus those 3 important games in a row there to start that stretch off. So that's kind of where we are. Chris has tended to beat expectations on these injuries. He is somebody who absolutely hates to sit games, and the Suns have not a real reason to worry from a standings standpoint, but they also don't want to be getting him into rhythm, from the opening tip of a playoff game, right? You want to give him a little bit more time to get comfortable. Last but not least, I actually do think, though, this has the opportunity to be a little bit of a silver lining for the Suns in terms of giving Chris rest physically. Not, of course, you don't want the injury, and you'll have to wonder how that hand will hold up when he does get in. If it's something where he does, quote unquote, beat expectations, that also might mean that it's not 100% healed. Maybe it's 90% healed, and then you have to keep an eye on it. But apart from that, he will be able to catch his breath a little bit. This is a guy who we've all been worried about from a minute standpoint for a little while now. He was playing upwards of 38, 40, 42 minutes many, many nights lately while Payne has been hurt, while Landry Shamet has been hurt. You don't want to see that. So if he does get to sit here for a couple of weeks, I would think from a conditioning standpoint, from an exhaustion standpoint, from a wear and tear standpoint, that could be a blessing in disguise. So we will see. Of course, there's no way to predict or know that, but it's not the worst outcome here at all. It could end up being something we look back on as a benefit. Speaking of Payne and Landry Shamet, those 2 guys are exactly the first place we all should be looking to see who should step up, who will step up. It's got to start with them. We'll talk about that in just a second. Football might be over this season, folks, but basketball is still going. You could say full steam ahead. Pro and college hoops are in full steam mode. From the latest odds, totals, player performance props, and even where the next fired coach might land, betonline.net is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for scores, podcasts, and news throughout the season. Yeah, that's right. BetOnline has content now to help your betting take to a next level and to keep up with everything going on. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, the UFC, even your favorite Vegas casino games. If you're itching to play the slots and you haven't been able to in a while, go to BetOnline, see what they have in store over there as well. That website, again, betonline.net, or their mobile app to learn more about the trends and action and get into it. BetOnline, where the game starts. The last aspect of Chris Paul's injury here, and again, as I just wish I could have spent more time on the All-Star game here. Book was on the floor to close the game after last season and the season before. It felt like I don't know. I came away a little frustrated in the past that he wasn't playing very much, but this year he played 30 minutes, scored 20 points. It put on a show. I mean, he started to miss his threes late, but we can't talk about that. We have to keep talking about the Chris Paul thing. That is the biggest story of the moment here. And the last part is Landry Shamet, Cameron Payne, and maybe some others. And yeah, the big question being who will have to and who will be able to step up in his stead, in Chris Paul's stead. So the easy answer is Cameron Payne. John Gambadoro, prior to the Chris Paul injury ever happening, prior to any of that, Gambo had it that Cam Payne and Landry Shamet both were targeting a return on Thursday, which will be the Suns' first game back after the break. That is on the road against the Oklahoma City Thunder. That has been the game the Suns were targeting. They were just planning, hey, let's hold these two guys out through the All-Star break. Couldn't be better timing because they will really need them now. And again, Payne being the first place you would want to look. So what's interesting about that, though, is after the bubble, what's funny actually is the bubble stats and the last season stats for Cam Payne are almost identical, even though the bubble was only 8 games. It's kind of interesting in that way. But this year he has really, really fallen off a little bit statistically. I think nothing I've seen from him scares me from the standpoint of like he's not going to be the same player. But you look at the numbers, he's been at 48, 49% from the field during most of his time as a Sun. This year, 40%. He was at 52% from deep in the bubble, 44% last season. This year, 34%, pretty significantly below average. He is getting to the free throw line a little bit more. He has been taking more 2-point shots, more shots overall this season. Not exactly the most efficient, but he's been changing his game a little bit. So I'm not going to sit here and say that, again, he has just crumbled as a useful player. I definitely do not believe that. But in addition to those counting stats falling off, Cameron Payne, of regular rotation players for the Suns, only Abdel Nader and Elfrid Payton have had a worse impact on the team's plus minus when they are on versus when they are off the court. So when Cameron Payne is on the floor for the Suns, they are 5.3 points worse per 100 possessions in their net rating. Again, only Nader and Payton are worse, and those guys are pretty significantly below the rest of the pack. Once you get away from Payne's 5.3, the next closest is minus 2.6. So that's not good. And it's mostly been on the offensive side of the ball. The Suns are 8.8 points worse per 100 possessions offensively when Payne has been out there this year. They've actually been a little bit better defensively. And again, that's not good, of course, to state the obvious. What is worth considering, though, within that is Chris Paul has been so incredible that it's almost difficult because for the most part, most of Payne's minutes have come when Paul is off the floor. So you're taking who I believe to be the Suns' most valuable player off of the court, and then you're plopped in there. And of course, your numbers are going to look a little worse than somebody like, I guess Jay Crowder. Most of his minutes come with the starters when Paul is out there. So Jay Crowder, the Suns are 4.2 points better per 100 possessions when Crowder's out there. Do you think that's Crowder making that entire difference? No, of course not. This stuff is all connected. So I don't want to be too harsh on Payne, but the numbers aren't great. You will have to be hoping, if you're excited about the Cameron Payne option here as a fill-in during this moment, you're probably buying into the idea that maybe the rest and the ability to fully recover from the injury will help him, that the shooting just evens out. He's been a good shooter for the Suns for 2 years now, and there's no reason to believe that that's gone. So you would hope that could come back and just, again, even out, regress in the positive direction a little bit. And you have to hope that maybe getting the confidence of saying, hey, I got to step up here. I'm going to be playing a ton of minutes. Payne will probably be the starter, I would guess, although we can talk about another option there in a second. And that might be a little bit of wind in his sails as well. Like, hey, it's on me. I got to do this. And that can have something of a boosting effect for guys when they know that that's coming. So Payne is first and foremost. I would say he's been playing just over 20 minutes a game this season. I would think that goes up. I would think he's 25-30. The other player, of course, that you're going to look at, I talked about Landry Shamet coming back also. Unfortunately, I just have to be realistic. Even if he steps up, he's not going to be the guy to replace what Chris Paul does. We can keep dreaming about the playmaking coming along for Shamet. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think 0.5 has been the boon for him that you might have hoped. So the other guy, it's Aaron Holiday. And we sang the praises of Aaron Holiday on Friday's episode of this show last week with Aaron Edwards, and I let the silliness pile up a little bit on that show because I actually don't think it's fully silly. I actually do think Holiday I thought he could make a difference before we really even knew the severity of this Chris Paul thing, and I still think it. And I feel like I've heard on a podcast, I want to say it might have been Rob Mahoney of The Ringer. They were talking about the Paul injury and forecasting out a little bit. And he mentioned the fit of Payne off the bench is so good that maybe the Suns do actually go with Holiday as the starter. And I don't hate that. I don't hate that. I think Holiday's ability to kind of engineer the offense a little bit more consistently as a drive and kick kind of pick and roll operator, whereas Payne, he's a shoot first guy, right? He's going to want to play in space and he's going to be looking for his shot. Whereas Holiday, I think I trust a little bit more in the half court to be a guy who can, do that. I always get it's awkward. It's an awkward thing to have to say. I wish there was a better name for it. The midget dribble stuff, the Steve Nash up and under the basket, the under and back out that Nash did. Holiday has a little bit of that in his game. He has the pull-up three, so he can keep the defense honest in a way out of that pick and roll that I don't know if Payne can quite do. So I don't think that's a terrible option. You get a little bit more of that defensive intensity at the point of attack from Holiday. Payne has, I would say, been a little bit of a weaker defender this year as far as I've been able to see than he was last year. He's not really a huge plus out there, whereas Holiday, even though he gives up some size, you can kind of see it. So I don't know which will start, but the obvious answer is both guys need to step up. The other part of this, and I actually think we could see a little bit more Elfrid Payton actually still. I think that as difficult as that might be for some Suns fans to hear, I think he's been so good that he's been I need to catch myself. He has not been so good. He has been just good enough, and Monty likes him so much is what my point was going to be, that we could still see it happen. No matter who it is, the main area the Suns are going to miss Chris Paul is going to be in the clutch. And I wish I could devote a little bit more time to that, but I think the reality is the answer there is going to be more Devin Booker. I think in the last few minutes of close games, the ball is going to be in Devin Booker's hands. We can go back to the numbers. The Suns are leading, Chris Paul is leading the NBA in plus minus in clutch situations. At one point this year, the top 6 was all 5 Suns starters, and I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or something. I don't know if it's like that anymore, but Paul has been the absolute leader in that capacity. And as much as I think that, Holiday could be good, Payne could be good, I think there's fits there. I think they can get some interesting lineups out there. They need somebody who can create great shots every single trip down in crunch time. And really the only other guy aside from Paul who I trust to do that is Devin Booker. So expect to see that. Expect to see a lot more of that. That's where Shamet being healthy could help, actually, is that he can, fill up a little bit more of the minutes and the sets and stuff that Booker may have taken on early in games when Paul was healthy. Now, Booker probably should be thought of and should be utilized as that end of game assassin. Like, he needs to own the fourth quarter of these games if they're within reach in either direction, if the Suns are trying to come back or if they're trying to keep a lead. So yes, the other point guards will play a role here, but we might end up looking back at this stretch and thinking, man, this is when Booker really proved how great he is. This is when Booker really proved how special of a talent he is as a playmaker. And maybe he reaffirms and establishes his bona fides as an all-NBA guy, potentially an MVP candidate in terms of, down ballot probably. I don't think he's going to be able to storm back and win it, unfortunately, but big opportunity on his plate as well. Excited to see what happens. I don't think that one seed is within reach of anybody, so we can kind of just sit back and take it all in. It's not going to be as fun to watch this team. It's certainly not a situation anyone wanted to see, but it could be a lot worse. So we'll be here every single day. Thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen, guys. We'll have a couple of special shows to close out the rest of the week heading into game night on Thursday. Roundtable on the Western Conference. We will also have a back and forth with Locked On Knicks about DeAndre Ayton. So it should be a fun week. Again, thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen. Now, go make Locked On NBA your second listen to get a recap of All-Star Weekend.